The thermos sat innocently on my kitchen counter, steam curling from the spout where I'd barely loosened the cap. The familiar scent of chamomile and honey filled the air, a small comfort on an otherwise ordinary afternoon. But then Chloe, my 8-year-old niece, looked at me with an intensity I'd never seen before, and the quiet calm of my kitchen shattered. My voice was barely a whisper. "What did you just say?" Chloe stepped closer, her small hand reaching for mine. When she spoke again, her words were clear, steady, and utterly devastating. "Mom's been lying about me for 8 years. I can talk. I've always been able to talk." The room spun. I instinctively grabbed the counter's edge, my knuckles white against the cool marble. My sister, Sarah, always so confident, so successful, perfect Sarah, had worn Chloe's selective mutism like a badge of honor. For years, she'd given speeches, written articles, even built an entire identity around being the devoted mother of a child with special needs. We'd seen countless specialists and therapists, all of whom had failed to coax a single word from Chloe. My mind immediately flashed to all those family gatherings, holidays, and dinners where Chloe communicated only through gestures and a tablet. Sarah was always right there, translating, controlling the narrative, soaking up praise for her patience and strength. "That's impossible," I heard myself say, even as I knew, deep down, that it wasn't. The pieces were already falling into place with a sickening clarity. Chloe pulled out her phone, her small fingers moving with practiced ease. "I've been recording things. Mom doesn't know. She thinks I'm just playing games." She handed me the device, and I pressed play on the first video. Sarah's voice filled my kitchen. "Remember, baby, if you ever tell anyone you can speak, Daddy will get in very serious trouble. The police will take him away, and it'll be all your fault." The video showed Chloe nodding, tears streaming down her cheeks. The date stamp read, 2 months ago. My stomach lurched. I played another clip. This one was older, Chloe much younger. "Good girl for staying quiet at Grandma and Grandpa's house. That's our special secret, remember? If you talk to Aunt Olivia or anyone else, very bad things will happen." I sank into a chair, the phone still clutched in my hand. "How long have you been recording?" "Since I turned 7. Mom gave me the phone for communication purposes." Chloe made air quotes with her fingers. She didn't realize I figured out how to hide files in a locked folder. There are 43 videos total. 43 pieces of evidence, showing Sarah had been manipulating everyone for years. Then I remembered the thermos. The tea. Why did she leave it? I asked, refocusing. Chloe's expression darkened. "Last night, I heard her on the phone with Dad. They were talking about your inheritance from Grandpa Thomas. Mom said once you were out of the picture, they could contest the will. She mentioned making you sick enough to need hospitalization, then documenting your mental health crisis for the lawyers. Grandpa Thomas had passed away 4 months earlier, leaving me his estate, a decision that had caused significant tension. Sarah, as the older sister, the one with a child to provide for, had expected everything. She'd smiled tightly at the will reading, her congratulations thin and hollow. I picked up the thermos with a dish towel, careful not to leave additional fingerprints. "We need to call the police." "Not yet," Chloe said, a determination in her voice far beyond her 8 years. "If we call now, Mom will just say I'm lying about talking. She'll get doctors to testify about my selective mutism. She'll make everyone believe you're trying to exploit me for the inheritance." She pulled a small notebook from her backpack. We need to be smarter than her. Looking at that notebook, filled with Chloe's neat handwriting, I realized my niece had been planning this revelation for a very long time. What do you have in mind? Mom and Dad don't come back from the cruise for 5 more days. That gives us time to gather everything we need. Chloe flipped open the notebook, revealing pages of observations, dates, and details. Mom's been taking from your trust fund. The one Grandpa Thomas set up for both of you when you were kids. My blood went cold. How do you know that? Dad works from home on Thursdays. His office is next to my playroom. The walls are thin. Chloe's matter-of-fact tone made the revelation even more disturbing. He handles Mom's finances. I've heard him talking to the accountant about transferring funds, covering tracks, and making withdrawals look legitimate. For the next hour, Chloe walked me through everything she'd overheard. Sarah and her husband, Mark, had been systematically draining my trust fund for 3 years. Using a power of attorney, Sarah convinced me to grant her after a surgery when I temporarily needed help managing my affairs. I'd never revoked it. Why would I? She was my sister. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Sarah had been my closest confidant growing up. We'd shared secrets, supported each other through breakups and career changes, celebrated victories. When Chloe was born, I'd been in the delivery room. I'd rocked her to sleep, changed her diapers, loved her like my own. All while Sarah was plotting against me. There's more, Chloe said quietly. She pulled up a document on her phone. Mom's been keeping a journal. She backs it up to the cloud. I know her password because I watched her type it in. She handed me the phone again. Sarah's words filled the screen in neat typed entries. The most recent one made my hands shake. Olivia called today about Thanksgiving. She sounded tired. Good. The herbal supplements I've been adding to her coffee when I visit are working. Nothing dangerous, just enough to make her foggy, forgetful. Dr. Reynolds mentioned she seemed scattered at her last checkup, building the narrative slowly. By next year, we should have enough documentation to suggest early-onset dementia. Mark's lawyer friend says that would be grounds to challenge Grandpa's will, especially if we can show she was incompetent when you made those last changes. The entry was dated 3 weeks ago. I ran to the bathroom and was violently ill. Everything made sense now. The persistent headaches, the memory lapses I'd attributed to stress, the way I'd been forgetting appointments and misplacing things. Sarah had been administering substances to me slowly, carefully, just enough to make me doubt myself. Chloe appeared in the doorway with a glass of water. I'm sorry you have to see all this. You have nothing to apologize for. I rinsed my mouth, accepting the water gratefully. How did you figure out what she was doing? Mom keeps the supplements in her purse. I looked them up online. They're not vitamins like the labels say. One of them can cause cognitive problems if you take too much over time. Chloe's voice wavered slightly. I wanted to warn you sooner, but I was scared. Mom always knows when I'm upset, even when I don't show it. She can read me too well. I pulled Chloe into a hug, feeling her small body shake against mine. You're incredibly brave. You know that, right? She nodded against my shoulder. Can we still stop her? Yes. I pulled back, looking into eyes that reflected both fear and hope. But we're going to do this carefully. Your mom thinks she's the smartest person in any room. We're going to use that against her. Over the next 2 days, I contacted my attorney, Daniel Finch, someone Sarah had never met. Daniel had handled Grandpa Thomas's estate, and he'd been trying to reach me for weeks about some irregularities he'd noticed. I'd missed his calls, thanks to Sarah's helpful suggestions that I was overwhelmed and should let her screen my messages. Daniel's jaw tightened as I played Chloe's recordings in his office. This is beyond estate fraud. Your sister's committed multiple serious offenses. He made several notes, his pen scratching urgently across paper. The question is how we proceed without tipping her off. I want everything documented before she comes home, I said. Every illegal transfer, every instance of her giving me those substances, every lie she's told about Chloe. When Sarah walks off that cruise ship, I want the authorities waiting. Daniel nodded slowly. That's ambitious. We have 4 days left. Then we better work fast. The first priority was securing my medical evidence. Daniel connected me with Dr. Eleanor Vance, a toxicologist who specialized in cases involving deliberate harm. She reviewed my recent medical history with growing concern, particularly the blood work from my last physical that showed elevated levels of certain compounds. Your primary care physician noted these abnormalities, but attributed them to stress, Dr. Vance explained, her fingers tracing the lab results on her screen. Looking at the supplements your sister was using, the correlation is clear. She was administering a combination that, while not immediately lethal, would produce cumulative cognitive effects over time. I sat in her sterile examination room, feeling violated in ways I couldn't articulate. How long before permanent damage would have occurred? You're fortunate you discovered this when you did. Another 6 months of consistent exposure could have resulted in irreversible neurological issues. She ordered comprehensive testing, drawing what felt like dozens of vials of blood. We'll document everything. The prosecution will need irrefutable medical evidence. Chloe accompanied me to these appointments, sitting quietly while doctors poked and prodded. She brought a sketchbook and spent the waiting time drawing intricate patterns, her pencil moving with focused precision. During one particularly long wait, she showed me what she'd been creating. A detailed map of her house with annotations marking where Sarah kept various items. Her filing cabinet has a false bottom, Chloe said, pointing to her careful drawing. I saw her put papers there once when she thought I was napping. The key is taped under her desk drawer. How observant have you had to be? The question came out sadder than I'd intended. Chloe shrugged, a gesture that seemed far too worldly for an 8-year-old. When you can't talk, people forget you're listening. Mom would have entire conversations on the phone right in front of me. She'd leave documents open on her laptop while I played nearby. I think she forgot I could read. The realization hit me hard. Sarah had been so convinced of her own superiority, so certain that Chloe's silence meant ignorance, that she'd become careless. Her daughter had been gathering evidence for over a year, waiting for the right moment to expose everything. Daniel arranged for a forensic accountant, Sophia Chen, to examine my financial records. Sophia arrived at my house with 2 assistants and multiple laptops, transforming my dining room into a makeshift investigation center. Chloe watched with fascination as they worked, occasionally offering insights that made Sophia's eyebrows rise. Your trust fund has been accessed 147 times over the past 3 years, Sophia said after the first day of analysis. The withdrawals were strategically timed and varied in amount to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. Whoever did this understood banking security protocols. Mark worked in financial services before switching to consulting, I said. He'd know exactly how to exploit the system. Sophia nodded grimly. The transfers were laundered through shell companies, then redistributed to accounts in both their names. They purchased a vacation property in Colorado, invested in cryptocurrency, and made substantial improvements to their primary residence. All funded by your inheritance. The dollar amounts made me nauseous. Sarah and Mark had lived well off my money while maintaining the facade of struggling parents dealing with their daughter's condition. They'd attended fundraisers, accepted donations from well-meaning friends, and played the sympathy card at every opportunity. There's another issue, Sophia continued, pulling up a different spreadsheet. They've been collecting disability benefits for Chloe based on her supposed mutism. That's federal fraud on top of everything else. Chloe looked up from her drawing. I had to go to special therapy sessions twice a week. Mom made me sit there and pretend I couldn't communicate. The therapist was really nice, but I felt bad lying to her. You weren't lying, I said firmly. Your mother forced you into an impossible situation. None of this is your fault. We worked late into each evening, building a case that Daniel described as prosecutorial gold. Sarah's own meticulous record-keeping became her downfall. She documented everything and encrypted files that she believed were secure, never imagining that Chloe had watched her enter passwords, had memorized patterns, had paid attention to every careless moment. On the third night, while reviewing email correspondence between Sarah and Mark, I found a thread that made my blood run cold. They'd been planning this for 5 years, since before Grandpa Thomas had even shown signs of the illness that would eventually take his life. Sarah had encouraged his doctors to increase medications that caused confusion, had volunteered to manage his affairs, and had been positioning herself as his primary caregiver to influence his estate planning. The only thing that had disrupted her plans was Grandpa's sudden clarity in his final weeks. He changed his will with the help of a different attorney, one Sarah hadn't influenced or controlled. He'd left everything to me with a simple note, *, Olivia has always been honest. Trust her to do right, *, those words took on new meaning now. Had he suspected Sarah's manipulations? Had he seen through her performance in ways the rest of us hadn't? I'd never know for certain, but the thought that he tried to protect me from beyond the grave brought tears to my eyes. Chloe found me crying in my office around midnight. Are you okay? Just thinking about your great-grandpa. He was a good man. I wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. Mom hated him, Chloe said matter-of-factly. She'd say nice things to his face, but complain about him constantly at home. She said he was stubborn and old-fashioned and didn't appreciate her. He appreciated honesty. Your mom probably found that threatening. Chloe climbed into my lap, despite being almost too big for it. I'm glad he left everything to you. You'll use it for good things. Mom would have just spent it on herself. The investigation expanded to include Sarah's professional life. She worked as a consultant for nonprofit organizations, positioning herself as an expert in disability advocacy. Daniel discovered she'd been inflating her credentials, claiming certifications she didn't have, and accepting speaking fees under false pretenses. Her entire career was built on exploiting Chloe's condition. She's given at least 30 presentations over the past 2 years, Daniel said, showing me Sarah's speaking calendar. Each one paid between $2,000 and $5,000. She wrote articles, appeared on podcasts, and cultivated a social media following, all while forcing her daughter to maintain a deception. The scope of the deception was staggering. Sarah hadn't just committed fraud against me. She'd built an empire of lies that touched dozens of organizations and hundreds of people who trusted her expertise. Parents of children with disabilities had sought her advice. Schools had implemented her recommendations. She'd influenced policy decisions based on fabricated experiences. Chloe's recordings became crucial evidence for these additional charges. Several videos showed Sarah coaching Chloe before public appearances, reminding her to act natural and not make eye contact when people talk to you. In one particularly damning clip, Sarah practiced her presentation about embracing your child's silence while Chloe sat in the background, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted to scream during those speeches," Chloe told me. "Mom would talk about accepting me as I was, but she never accepted me. She created me." The girl she described in those presentations wasn't real. Dr. Vance connected us with a child psychologist, Dr. Michael Rodriguez, who specialized in cases involving parental manipulation. His assessment of Chloe took several sessions, during which he documented the sophisticated manipulation tactics Sarah had employed. "Chloe exhibits signs of complex trauma," Dr. Rodriguez explained during our consultation. "Her mother didn't just force her silence. She created an entire false reality and punished Chloe psychologically for any deviation from the script. The fact that Chloe maintained her sense of self enough to document and ultimately expose this demonstrates remarkable resilience." Will she be okay? The question felt inadequate for what I really wanted to know. With proper support and therapy, yes. She's already shown incredible strength. The key now is helping her understand that speaking her truth was the right choice, regardless of the consequences for her mother. Those consequences were mounting rapidly. Daniel had coordinated with the district attorney's office, and an assistant DA, Emily Carter, was building a case that spanned multiple jurisdictions and charge categories. She visited my house on the fourth day, reviewing everything we'd compiled with the intensity of someone preparing for war. "This is one of the most comprehensive fraud cases I've seen," Emily said, her laptop screen reflecting off her glasses as she scrolled through documents. "The challenge will be presenting it coherently to a jury. Your sister's crimes are extensive but complex." "What about Chloe?" I asked. "Will she have to testify?" "Almost certainly. Her testimony about the forced mutism is crucial." Emily looked at Chloe, who'd been listening from the kitchen table. "Would you be comfortable talking about your experiences in court?" Chloe nodded without hesitation. "I want people to know the truth. All of it." Emily spent an hour preparing Chloe for what to expect, the formality of court, the types of questions she'd face, the presence of Sarah and Mark. Chloe absorbed everything with the same focused attention she'd applied to her year of secret observation. "Mom will try to say I'm lying," Chloe said calmly. "She'll say Aunt Olivia coached me or that I'm confused. But I have proof. Lots of proof." "Yes, you do," Emily agreed. "And that proof is going to make all the difference." The night before Sarah's return, I barely slept. Chloe had fallen asleep on the couch around 10, exhausted from days of interviews, appointments, and preparation. I carried her to bed, tucking her in and watching her peaceful face in the dim glow of her nightlight. She looked so young, so vulnerable. Sarah had stolen 8 years of her childhood, turning her daughter into a prop for personal gain. I returned to the living room where Daniel and Sophia were finalizing documents. The dining room table was covered with evidence, bank statements, medical records, recordings, photographs, emails, everything we needed to destroy Sarah's carefully constructed lies. "Second thoughts?" Daniel asked, reading my expression. "None. I just wanted this to be over." I picked up one of Chloe's school photos from the table. A picture from 2 years ago where her smile looked forced, her eyes empty. "She deserves better than what Sarah gave her. She's getting it now," Sophia said softly. You're giving her a real chance at a normal life. Morning came with gray skies and a steady drizzle. Chloe dressed carefully, choosing an outfit we picked out together, something that made her look her age rather than the formal clothes Sarah always insisted on. We drove to the pier in silence, both of us lost in thoughts about what the next few hours would bring. Chloe had been staying with me since my family left for the cruise. Sarah had arranged it weeks ago, probably planning for me to be incapacitated by the supplemented tea. Instead, Chloe became my secret weapon. She knew where Sarah kept financial records, which laptop she used for personal business, and every password she'd ever mentioned aloud. With Daniel's guidance, we methodically documented everything. I gave blood samples showing the presence of the substances Sarah had been feeding me. We retrieved deleted emails between Sarah and Mark discussing the inheritance challenge. Chloe's videos provided irrefutable proof of the systematic deception regarding her supposed mutism. The most damning evidence came from Sarah's own files. She'd been meticulous in her planning, keeping spreadsheets of every withdrawal from my trust fund, every expenditure she'd covered with my money, and every lie she'd told to justify her access. Her arrogance had made her sloppy. She never considered that anyone would look, much less find everything she'd hidden. On the third day, I received a text from Sarah. Having wonderful time. Chloe behaving. Miss you, sis. I stared at those words, thinking about all the times she called me sis while plotting my destruction. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I typed back, Chloe's perfect. See you soon. Daniel had coordinated with the district attorney's office. The evidence we'd compiled, financial records, medical documentation, Chloe's testimony and recordings, built an airtight case, white-collar crimes, attempted harm, child exploitation, and fraud. Sarah had been busy. There's something else we need to address, Daniel said during our final meeting before Sarah's return. Chloe's welfare. Given everything she's experienced, we should involve Child Protective Services. Chloe had been sitting quietly in the corner of his office, coloring. Her head snapped up. No, I want to stay with Aunt Olivia. That's not my decision, sweetheart, Daniel said gently. But I'll make sure everyone knows that's your preference. The cruise ship docked on Saturday morning. I'd received regular updates from Sarah throughout the week, cheerful messages about shipboard activities, photos of my parents smiling in tropical ports, and promises to bring me back souvenirs. Each text felt like another small betrayal. I met them at the pier with Chloe. My parents emerged first, tanned and relaxed. Mom hugged me tightly. We missed you so much. How was your week? Enlightening, I said, the word tasting bitter. Sarah appeared moments later with Mark, her smile broad and genuinely looking. She'd always been an excellent actress. Olivia. And there's my baby girl. She reached for Chloe, who slipped behind me instead. Sarah's smile flickered. Chloe, come give Mommy a hug. No thank you, Chloe said clearly. The entire pier seemed to go silent. My parents froze. Mark's face went pale. Sarah's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear before settling on forced delight. Chloe, you spoke. Sarah's voice pitched high. Oh my goodness, this is wonderful. When did this happen? I've always been able to speak, Chloe said calmly. You made me pretend I couldn't. But I'm done pretending now. Mark grabbed Sarah's arm. What is she talking about? Before Sarah could answer, 2 police officers approached. Sarah Brennan. Mark Brennan, we need you to come with us. The confrontation that followed played out like a surreal nightmare. Sarah denied everything at first, her voice rising as she insisted Chloe was confused, possibly traumatized by finally speaking after years of silence. She appealed to our parents, tears streaming down her face as she painted herself as the victim of some misunderstanding. Then the officers mentioned the evidence, the recordings, the financial records, the medical tests showing I'd been systematically given harmful substances. Sarah's mask cracked. Olivia, please. We can work this out. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. Raising Chloe alone, basically, with Mark working constantly. The medical bills. I made mistakes, but I'm your sister. You tried to destroy me. My voice came out steady despite the tears blurring my vision. You used your own daughter as a pawn. You gave me harmful substances. You took from me. And you did it all while pretending to love me. I do love you. Sarah's desperation made her ugly. This is all a misunderstanding. Chloe's been confused her whole life. She doesn't know what she's saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Chloe's small voice cut through Sarah's protests. You made me lie for 8 years. You threatened Daddy, threatened Aunt Olivia, and made me watch you hurt people. I'm not confused. I'm just done being quiet. The officers led Sarah and Mark away in handcuffs. My parents stood frozen, their vacation glow fading as they tried to process what had just unfolded. Mom reached for me, her hand trembling. Olivia, what happened? I told them everything. Right there on the pier, surrounded by confused travelers and curious onlookers, I detailed Sarah's years of deception. I showed them Chloe's recordings on my phone. I explained about the trust fund, the substances, and the inheritance scheme. Mom cried. Dad looked like someone had physically struck him. They kept apologizing, though none of this was their fault. They'd been as thoroughly deceived as I had been. How could we not see it? Mom whispered. Our own daughter. She was good at hiding it, I said. She made a career out of appearing perfect. The legal proceedings took months. Sarah attempted multiple defenses, claiming Chloe had been coached, suggesting I'd fabricated evidence out of jealousy, even trying to paint herself as mentally unwell and not responsible for her actions. Nothing stuck. The evidence was overwhelming, and Chloe's testimony proved devastating. Mark took a plea deal, testifying against Sarah in exchange for a reduced sentence. His cooperation revealed even more offshore accounts, forged documents, and plans to discredit me that stretched back years. He'd been a willing participant in every scheme. The worst part was learning how long it had been going on. Sarah had started small, testing boundaries after Grandpa Thomas first created our trust funds when we were teenagers. A small withdrawal here, a transfer there. When no one noticed, she got bolder. By the time Grandpa died and left me his estate, she'd already taken nearly $200,000 from my trust. Chloe's situation proved more complex. Child services got involved, as Daniel had predicted. There were interviews, psychological evaluations, and countless meetings. Throughout it all, Chloe remained remarkably composed, answering questions with a clarity that impressed everyone who spoke with her. The psychologist's report painted a troubling picture. Chloe had developed sophisticated coping mechanisms to survive her mother's manipulation. She'd learned to compartmentalize, to observe without reacting, and to protect herself by appearing to comply while secretly documenting everything. The report recommended extensive therapy, but noted Chloe's resilience and strong attachment to me. After 6 weeks of evaluations and hearings, I was granted temporary custody. Mom and Dad supported the decision, though the situation had aged them visibly. They'd lost one daughter to prison and struggled to reconcile the Sarah they'd known with the person revealed in court. How did we raise someone capable of this? Dad asked one evening, sitting in my living room while Chloe did homework at the kitchen table. You didn't raise this, I said firmly. Sarah made her own choices. You gave her the same love and values you gave me. What she did with them was her decision. He nodded, though I could see the guilt still eating at him. Parents always blame themselves, even when there's no logical reason to do so. Sarah was sentenced to 12 years for fraud, attempted harm, and child endangerment. Mark received 8 years. They both appealed, of course, but the convictions held. On the day of sentencing, Sarah finally dropped her mask of contrition. She stared at me across the courtroom, her expression cold. You always had to be the special one, she said. Grandpa's favorite. Everyone's little princess. I was older, smarter, more accomplished, but nothing was ever good enough. Because you existed. Her words should have hurt. Instead, I felt only pity. I never competed with you, Sarah. You were fighting a war I didn't even know existed. Exactly, she spat. You got everything without even trying, without even caring. Do you know what that's like? Watching someone coast through life on charm and luck while you work yourself to the bone. I worked too, I said quietly. I built my career, my life, my relationships. You just never saw it because you were too busy resenting me for existing. The bailiff led her away, still ranting. I never saw my sister again outside of official contexts. She wrote me letters from prison, long rambling things that alternated between justification and blame. I read the first few before Daniel advised me to stop. Nothing Sarah said would change what happened or provide the closure I needed. Closure came from other places. From Chloe thriving in therapy, slowly learning to trust again. From watching her make friends at her new school, speaking freely without fear. From the first time she called me Mom by accident, then looked terrified until I smiled and said it was okay. You're more of a mom than she ever was, Chloe told me later. Real moms don't hurt their kids. We established new routines, new traditions, Sunday morning pancakes, Thursday game nights. Chloe joined the school choir. Her voice, unused for so long in public settings, turned out to be remarkably clear and strong. The first time I heard her solo at a school concert, I cried through the entire performance. You're embarrassing me, Chloe whispered afterward, but she was smiling. I'm allowed to be proud, I countered, pulling her into a hug. Financial restitution from Sarah and Mark's seized assets went into a trust for Chloe, managed by Daniel with oversight from an independent board. The money couldn't undo the trauma, but it would ensure Chloe's educational expenses and future needs were covered. I refused to touch any of it for my own purposes, wanting Chloe to know that her well-being mattered more than wealth. Daniel also helped me establish a foundation in Grandpa Thomas's name dedicated to supporting children who'd experienced parental manipulation or harmful control. Part of the recovered funds went toward this cause, transforming Sarah's theft into something positive. Grandpa would have approved. As Chloe's 9th birthday approached, she asked for something unexpected. Can we visit, Mom? Just once? The request caught me off guard. Are you sure that's what you want? I think I need to see her to say goodbye properly. Chloe's expression was thoughtful, not distressed. Dr. Rodriguez says closure is important. I consulted with both Dr. Rodriguez and Daniel before agreeing. The prison visit was scheduled for a weekday afternoon, giving us privacy. Chloe dressed carefully for it, choosing clothes Sarah had never seen, outfits that reflected Chloe's actual preferences rather than her mother's imposed style. The visiting room was exactly as depressing as I'd imagined: harsh fluorescent lights, industrial furniture, and the lingering smell of disinfectant. Sarah entered wearing a prison jumpsuit that aged her. Her hair pulled back severely, her face bare of the makeup she'd always considered essential. She stopped short when she saw Chloe. "Baby, you came." "I'm not a baby anymore," Chloe said calmly. "I'm 9 next week." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I've missed so much. Your birthday, the holidays, everything. This is all a terrible misunderstanding, you know that, right? Aunt Olivia turned you against me." "No." Chloe's voice stayed level. "You turned me against you when you made me lie for 8 years. When you threatened Daddy. When you caused harm to Aunt Olivia. I came here to tell you that I forgive you, but I don't want you in my life anymore." Chloe stood, ready to leave. "I'm happy now. I have friends. I sing in the choir. I talk whenever I want without being afraid. You took those things from me for a long time, but I have them back now. I hope you get help. I hope you figure out why you needed to hurt people, but I'm not going to wait for that. I'm moving on." Sarah looked at me, her expression desperate. "You did this. You influenced her against me." "I gave her the truth," I said quietly. "Everything else was her choice." We left Sarah crying in the visiting room. Chloe remained composed until we reached the parking lot, then fell apart in my arms. I held her while she sobbed out 8 years of complicated emotions: love and betrayal, loss and relief, anger and grief, all tangled together. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked when the tears finally subsided. "You did exactly what you needed to do. I'm so proud of you." Chloe's birthday party the following week was a celebration of everything she'd reclaimed. Friends from school filled my backyard, their voices creating a joyful chaos that would have horrified Sarah's need for control. Chloe sang karaoke off-key, ate too much cake, and laughed until her sides hurt. Watching her simply being a kid felt like witnessing a miracle. 2 years after Sarah's sentencing, Chloe and I were officially sitting in family court for the final adoption hearing. She wore a blue dress she picked out herself and gripped my hand tightly as the judge reviewed our paperwork. "Chloe," the judge said kindly, "do you understand what adoption means?" "Yes, Your Honor. It means Olivia becomes my legal mother forever." Chloe's voice stayed steady. "And is that what you want more than anything?" The judge smiled. "Then it's my honor to grant this petition. Congratulations to you both." Chloe threw her arms around me, and I held her close, feeling tears stream down my face. This child who'd been forced into silence had found her voice. This girl, who'd been used as a tool, had become a beacon of strength. We'd both survived Sarah's betrayal and built something better from the ashes. Walking out of the courthouse, Chloe slipped her hand into mine. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think Mom Sarah will ever understand what she did wrong?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't know. Some people are too wrapped up in their own pain to see the pain they cause others. Your birth mother made choices based on jealousy and greed. Whether she ever recognizes that isn't something we can control. I feel bad sometimes, Chloe admitted, for helping put her in prison. You didn't put her there. Her actions did. You just told the truth. I stopped walking and crouched down to Chloe's level. You saved us both. What you did took incredible courage. You should never feel guilty for that. She nodded, processing this. I'm glad I told you, even though it was scary. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. We walked to the car in comfortable silence. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer threatening. Sarah's shadow no longer hung over us. Chloe was free to speak, to grow, to become whoever she wanted to be, without manipulation or control. I'd lost a sister, but gained a daughter. The trade seemed impossibly unfair. I never should have had to choose. But given the reality of Sarah's betrayal, I'd make the same choice every time. Chloe deserved protection, love, and a chance at a normal childhood. That night, we celebrated with Chloe's favorite pizza and a movie marathon. My parents joined us, bringing flowers and a photo album they'd started, pictures of Chloe actually smiling, actually talking, actually living without pretense. Mom cried happy tears while showing Chloe pictures of herself at various school events, choir performances, and family dinners. Look how beautiful you are when you smile, Mom said, pointing to a recent photo. Really smile? Not the fake ones from before. Chloe studied the pictures thoughtfully. I look different now. You look free, I said. Later, after my parents left and Chloe was tucked into bed, I sat alone in the living room. The thermos Sarah had left, the one containing the supplemented tea, sat in an evidence box in my closet. The police had returned it after the trial, along with other items they'd seized. I kept it, though I wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe as a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. Maybe as proof that monsters don't always look like monsters. My phone buzzed with a new email. Another letter from Sarah had been scanned and sent by the prison system. I deleted it without reading. Whatever she wanted to say, whatever justifications or accusations she crafted, didn't matter anymore. She'd lost the right to my attention when she chose cruelty over love. Chloe appeared in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. Can't sleep. Just thinking. Come here. I patted the couch beside me. She curled up against my side, her head resting on my shoulder. We sat quietly for a while, listening to the house settle around us. Do you ever miss how things were before? Chloe asked softly, when everything seemed normal. Sometimes, I admitted, but that normal was built on lies. This might be harder, but it's real. I'll take messy truth over comfortable lies any day. Me too, Chloe yawned. Olivia? Yeah. Thank you for believing me. When I told you about the tea, you could have thought I was crazy. I could never think that. You're the bravest, smartest kid I know. I kissed the top of her head. And you're mine now. Forever. Forever, she echoed sleepily. Sitting there with Chloe in my arms, I thought about the path that had led us to this moment. Sarah's betrayal had been devastating, the kind of wound that never fully heals. But from that betrayal had come unexpected gifts, a daughter I loved fiercely, a clarity about what truly mattered, and the knowledge that we'd survived the worst and come out stronger. The cruise Sarah had planned was supposed to be my end. Instead, it marked a beginning. Chloe found her voice. I found my strength. Together, we built a family based on trust instead of manipulation, on love instead of obligation. Sarah was still out there, locked away, but alive. Sometimes, I wondered if she thought about us, if she felt any genuine remorse. Mostly, though, I didn't think about her at all. She'd taken enough of my time, my peace, and my trust. I wouldn't give her any more. Chloe shifted in her sleep, murmuring something I couldn't quite make out. I adjusted my position carefully, trying not to wake her, and pulled a blanket over us both. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, therapy appointments, school projects, the everyday complexities of raising a child who'd been through trauma. But tonight, we were safe. We were together. We were home. And that thermos, a relic of a life we'd left behind, would stay in that evidence box. A reminder that sometimes the worst betrayals come from those we trust most, but also that survival is possible. Healing is possible. Love, real and unconditional, is possible. Chloe had spoken her truth, and in doing so, she freed us both. That was worth more than any inheritance, any trust fund, or any version of normal that required silence and lies. The past couldn't be changed. Sarah's crimes couldn't be undone. But the future, our future, stretched ahead full of possibility. Have you ever had to choose between family and your own well-being?